David Hodge, N6AN, is our speaker tonight. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dave.
Okay. I'm David Hodge, N6AN, and happy to be here. Is my band open? That's a question that we all have. I've been hamming for a long time, and once upon a time, the way we did that was if we had time, we turned our radio on and we turned the big knob and we sort of picked a band because we had an antenna for it and we listened to see what we could find. And then maybe we called somebody or we just called CQ. And then as we got more involved with radio, I guess we thought maybe there's another way of doing this. So here's, I just threw this in because I've had the pleasure of operating from K3LR for 6 CQ worldwide contests. And boy, if you can't hear it at K3LR, then the band is not open. The way we used to do it was somebody would come across a DX station or, you know, whatever, and they'd call a friend. Or we had 2-meter links that we could tell each other, oh, hey, you know, so-and-so is on such and such frequency. But people were trying to figure out, you know, how do we get an idea what time of day I should be on a particular band and what date? And I had the pleasure of knowing Tony Jaffa N2N when I was in New York for a couple of years, and he invented this DX Edge, which some of you have probably seen. Probably some of you have one in a drawer, and some of you may never have seen them. But it was the Earth superimposed twice with these monthly scales that you could slide into this little plastic holder, and that would give you the daylight darkness, the terminator, the gray line, that you could scan across this flat Earth and see what was happening. You know, who was in darkness, who was in daylight. You could line it up over your QTH for sunrise or sunset and see. Now we have computer tools that do this much easier, but this was pretty exciting to have back in the 80s. And then there was a period of time when the ARRL would publish in QST these propagation charts. There was one for you know, various regions. So this was for the East Coast, and you can see there's a Caribbean window, and down in the lower right it says South America, above that Central Asia. And there was one for the West Coast, one for the central area of the US. But that was just one of the ways that we used to do things. Now this is just a list of resources that we can use today. Where's the, with apologies to the police, where's the little black spot on the sun today? And I did this yesterday, so I guess I could say today it's the same old thing as yesterday. That's just a little joke, sorry about that. So here's what we could do. If I turned on the radio today and I wanted to see what's around, I could pick a frequency and pick a band and just tune around. Well, maybe I don't hear anything. Well, that doesn't necessarily tell me that the band is dead. Maybe I check the solar flux and the sunspot number and the A and K indices beforehand, which I could do at, say, DX Summit or a number of other places where that chart is usually published. Or I could listen to the WSJC frequencies, for instance, 14074, 14075. And if I'm not hearing anything in the CW portion, but there's a lot of going on, then the band must be open. I could listen to WWV, and apparently they're even transmitting on 25 megahertz these days in some sort of beta test. But anywhere from 2.5 to 20 megahertz they're broadcasting depending on the power. I think at 2.5 and 20, they're half the power they are at 5, 10, 15 megahertz. Another option is to check the NCDXF, the Northern California DX Foundation beacons, which are on 14, 18, 21, 24, and 28 megahertz. It's 28 or 14.1, 18.110, 21.150. I'm not sure the 24, 28.150 or 28.200. If you go to their website, which I showed in that previous slide, ncdxf.org/beacon/index.html, there's a wonderful map there, which shows the world. It shows red dots where each beacon is. It even allows you to take a polar projection map and move it to your frequency, or you can click, if when you log into it, the little tab says show your location or not show your location, you can let the system find you, and it will set up the image so that your location is the 0 point for the beam headings. And if you scroll down, it will also show you for each of the, I think, 12 beacons or whatever number it is, what the propagation predictions for right now, when you're looking, are for that station, for that transmitter, which is pretty cool. Another thing is you could look at DX Summit for spots. You could look at DX Heat, which I just discovered recently, and also check their spots. DX Maps is another option, which has a lot of different tools. DX Maps is really good, especially if you're interested. Are you seeing DX Summit right now? Okay, just making sure that was working. This is really powerful if you want to see what's happening at a given time. You have a number of options. You can look at everything from above 450 megahertz all the way down into the low frequencies by changing the tab over here, LF, HF versus the VHF and up tab. So even 2200 meters. And you click on it, and it'll give you a map, and it'll show you what's happening on these bands. This is a great way of figuring out, is anything happening? And as an example, if I go to VHF and up and look at 50 megahertz, there's not a whole lot happening in the US, but there's a little bit happening. And since these are a combination of FT8 spots, CW spots, and also, I think, human-driven spots, so you could get phone spots here too, which we don't seem to have technology yet that can decode the voice the way we can decode CW and digital modes. But that's just a powerful aspect of this page, in that we can get all kinds of spots from different modes, as well as on different bands from LF to UHF. This is one thing I wanted to show. If you're not familiar with RBN, Reverse Beacon Network, this was something that I wanted to show. So let me log in. Here we are on the main page. We had a volunteer who was going to call CQ a couple of times. Are they able to do that right now?
Yes, this is Mark K6FG. Do you want me to do that?
Sure. On one of the low bands for nighttime. You don't have to tell me where. I think we can just find you. So in the meantime, I'm going to describe for Reverse Beacon Network if nobody's looked at this. On the welcome page, it's got some really handy information. Here are some of the things you can do with this. For one thing, you can download raw data, and this is really handy if I'm getting ahead of myself. They're going to do a spot search. Who's calling CQ? What's the call? Oh, K6FG, right?
Yeah, Mark, and I'm on 30 meters. Should I call CQ?
Yeah, go ahead and call CQ. This is a really cool function. You can put in a call sign, and I don't know. For instance, say you had a sked, and you maybe forgot where your friend was going to be, or
should I be calling CQ now while you're talking?
Sure. Go right ahead. Well, let's see if he comes up right now. I do a lot of summits on the air, and sometimes I don't get answers. But if I have cell phone coverage, I'll look at the RBN spots for myself and see if I'm being heard anywhere. And sometimes that's very reassuring. There we go. Okay. Here we are on the 16th of January at 03:53, and he's on 10.117 on 30 meters, and WZ7I is hearing him with a signal noise ratio of 11 dB, and he's sending it 20 words a minute. He's even louder at WB6BEE, and he's being heard in Texas, N5RZ in West Texas. And actually, if we look at some of his history, he was pretty loud at K3LR on the 8th of January on 40. This can be really handy for getting an idea. Is anybody hearing me? I will use this sometimes if I'm on a summit, and I will call CQ on 15 meters. And if I don't get spotted anywhere, that's a pretty good sign that nobody's going to hear me.
Should I stop sending CQ?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mark.
Do you want me to move to another band?
No, I think that's fine. That's good. Yeah, we got 5 spots or 6 spots here for you. Oh, you're even being heard by W3LPL.
That's a major big time contest station back in Maryland.
Yeah. And also WS3W is hearing you in zone 5. So yeah, you're getting out, Mark. So these are ways that we can just see, where might we want to transmit. And then, of course, if we're interested in looking for DX or something, we can always look at what's happening on any of these various websites that I've got up. I mean, DX Summit, well, RBN. If I look at the regular RBN Reverse Beacon Network page, just look at main here, it will show a mix of what's coming through. So OH6BG has spotted UG5F, pretty loud. So Finland to somewhere in Russia, and that's on 80 meters. DM6EE is hearing 9K2HS on 40. DX Summit's another way, and DX Heat is one that I just recently discovered. And if we put K6FG in here, then we should see his latest CQs, I think. Well, it's probably not updated. So yeah, this is only going back to the 12th. So I've never used this. I noticed this has some errors. This probably isn't. This requires some sort of database update that doesn't necessarily get all the spots instantly like some of the other ones. So those are some ways that we can figure out. We can make a decision about where we want to operate if we turn on the radio. Now, we could get so bogged down with all of these tools that we don't operate at all. You could stand up 3 hours later and you've learned a lot, and you've maybe you've vicariously worked the world. But if the idea was to actually make a contact, you've got 5 minutes more to make your contact. I'm going to shift gears now and talk about how we can use some of these tools to analyze how well antennas are working, or I like to look at where I've been heard when I've been on a SOTA summit, because if I'm only running 5 watts and depending on what kind of antenna, it gives me an idea of whether I need to work on my antenna or antenna placement or whatever. But for a DX station or a contest station, or even if one put up an NVIS antenna, one might want to have an idea of whether one's being heard within the region that one hopes to be reaching. So one of the things you can do with RBN, which is really with the Reverse Beacon Network, which is a really a neat tool. If I go to DX spots, I can download raw data. And one of the beauties of the RBN is that this data goes back a long way. I can go all the way back to February of 2009. And the way I would do this is if I'm on, say, 2010, and I just click on December here, it will open up the 1 to 31 days here, and it has a zip file for each day. So if I pick a date, I don't know, 25th, and I just click once on that, it will give me, permission where I just choose where I want to save that file. One caveat, if you look at, say, in a contest like November, and let's go to a more recent year, because there are so many more spotters. Let's go to November 2019 and look at one of the CQ Worldwide CW days, which, let's say Saturday. It's a big file. And the problem with that is that on these big contest weekends, the files usually exceed the capacity of a software like Excel. Once you've saved this file, you have to extract it, then double click it. And if you have Excel, if you have Windows Office, it will just try to open in Excel, say this file. From that RBN zip file, I need to extract that file. Then if I have Office, Windows Office, I can open it in Windows Office in Excel, and then I can alphabetize all of the spots, which include many, many, many other call signs than W6KA. So I'll alphabetize it, and then I'll extract from that big file just the W6KA ones and put them in a separate Excel file. And that's this result. So I can scroll through this and see, K07SS, we were 21 dB signal noise ratio on 20 meters, and we were on 14.025 for a long time. We had, good coverage. N5RZ, we were very loud in Texas. And if I look later in the day, I can see where we were, say, on other bands. And maybe not, because this is on Saturday, so it's only showing we were very active on 20. Here's another example of using RBN. In this case, I stumbled upon this on DX Summit. You can also extract what we did with K6FG, where I looked up his spots. I can get up to 100 spots right then and there, or I can use this spots function to find my spots on a particular day and extract them. And that's what I did here. This was actually what I got. I came out of DX Summit. I didn't realize DX Summit had this function. But this is a historical. All of the spots that DX Summit had for N6AN going back to 20 something. I think I've harped enough on what you can do looking at past spots. But there was one more thing I wanted to show you here, and that's I don't know if some of you have played with this, but you can do a spot analysis. I'm going to pick a day. I'm going to go back to November 2019 on the 26th, which was a CQ Worldwide, and I'm going to pick the European spot, EA5WU. The way that it's a little clumsy, but you pick a date, and then you pick a particular RBN software-defined radio, and sometimes these lists are pretty big, and it takes a while to populate. But EA5WU has 58,000 plus spots, and I have K3LR, and I'm going to add W3LPL and refresh the data. And it shows that K3LR had 274 spots by this EA5 station. W3LPL had 271. Now I can look at the different bands and I can compare, who's winning the signal strength contest. And it looks like LPL is winning it first year on 15, but we kind of equalize, and maybe K3LR is a little louder at the next peak and then has the band for a little longer. 20 meters kind of looks like a toss-up with a couple of exceptions here. 40 meters. These are just, I don't know, really awesome tools. And you have to kind of decide where you want to, who you want to compare. It's a little tedious to pick a particular station, but it can tell you a lot. Let's see who was, and the only problem with this is that sometimes this little icon here, this little green thing, which hopefully you can see, doesn't refresh, which means when I change a station, I can't do this over again. Normally, if I change state or change SDR stations, this should be green again. I click on it and it refreshes. But either it's very slow or it's just got so much, it's backed up with data, or I don't know what. This is apparently a common problem. Other people have mentioned this. I'm going to shift gears now and talk about what you can do in the future. And there are, I think, a number of tools. And just to mention it, because I just stumbled across this, if you can see this website, G0KYA, as I was reading through some VAACAP stuff, this guy's call sign is mentioned. And so I looked at this website, and I think there's a lot of information that can be made use of. There's a new, I guess a relatively new, well, it's new as of 2020, Understanding HF Propagation video. There are a number of other things here that are mentioned with links. And I would just suggest that this is, if you're interested, this is a good website to research. And this gentleman, Steve Nichols, is mentioned various times in the VAACAP instructions. So the impression I get is he knows a thing or two or three. I'm sure there are various other governments that have information, but this is apparently a pretty good one, according to an Australian ham who did a VAACAP YouTube video. Anyway, that being said, let's move on to VAACAP, which stands for Voice of America Communications Analysis Program. And I think we all know what VOA is, but Voice of America is a big broadcast station that the United States has used for decades to disseminate our story to various parts of the world, especially into Eastern Europe after the Berlin Wall went up. Voice of America would needed tools to figure out how to best get their signals to various parts of the world, and that's how this program came about. And it's very powerful. It is a prediction program, so you have to take what it tells you with a grain of salt, because it's not the definitive moment-to-moment occurrence that's happening. In general, what this program does is take a smooth sunspot number prediction that's calculated out several months in advance, and it will use that information to make its calculations. If you know that for the period of time that you're wanting to examine, which is either in the past or maybe in the near future, that the sunspot number is actually different, because these predictions can be very close and they can be very far off. We all know that sometimes the sun just wakes up and we didn't necessarily expect it, and we get marvelous propagation for a week or two and then it drops back down. We just had that experience, say, in November, and suddenly the solar flux was over 100, and it's been in the 60s and 70s for a long time. So the difference was notable. Anyway, all that said, this can provide a number of tools that are very, very informative, but they are just predictions. I think the most important thing is, if you go to this website here, voacap.com/HF, this is for hams, and at the very bottom, it says user's manual. I think that's the first thing we ought to look at. And I do have it up here, and we can scroll through it a little bit, but this would be, a very good, I don't know, half an hour or hour's worth of reading. This will fill your head with propagational goodness. So let me go back to this page. This apparently used to use a different map, but I guess Google Maps decided that it wasn't earning enough money, as somebody said, and so they they started to charge for it, and I guess these people didn't want to pay for it, so they are using a different open source map now. So it looks a little different than it used to be. But basically what this thing allows you to do is you can pick a transmit point, which is in red, and a receive point, and you can just set them where you want. Either this way, just, you know, drag, or you can go up here in the upper left where you have select TX QHX or QTH and RX QTH, and you can use the drop-down menus to pick spots, and there are a lot. Or if you know what the grid square is, even to the 6 digits, you can put it in these two here, or the latitude and longitude for both transmit and receive. Over here on the right, you have a mode that you can choose, and I tend to be CW guy, so I just leave it in CW. But if I were doing FT4 or FT8, which I have done a bit of, I could do that here. Or if I had really wanted to do AM, I could do that too. Let's just leave it on CW for now. I have this on 5 watts because I tend to run QRP when I'm on my hilltop, but let's use 100. For antennas, it creates this list of transmit and receive antennas. And by the way, there's a button down here that allows you to swap them. So if you are wanting to be the receiving end instead of the transmitting end, for instance, you can do that here. And then for each band, you have a choice of antennas. And I tend to be using probably a dipole at about 5 feet. So I just go through and put all these in that way, and then leave the general ones on the receive side if I'm trying to figure out how I'm doing transmit-wise. And so since we're following me, I'm just going to put in my grid square. And at some point, when yeah, there we go. It registered the change. And let's not be so ambitious for 5 watts. So let's go to Florida. Although I have crossed the pond with 5 watts, it's pretty exciting. Got the antenna set, and then under settings, we can adjust the program for the local QRN, so to speak. Not really QRN, but you know, what our local noise situation is. You know, if we lived out in the desert and it's fairly quiet, then you know, we might be here at this much quieter setting than say residential. I'm just going to use residential because it's maybe more realistic. Signal or the sunspot number, if -1 is in this window, then the program is going to rely on the predictions that are already generated for the next several months. One can put in what they know the numbers to be, but they just have to be careful that you know, they're being fairly accurate, because I guess you can probably get the program to give you a very erroneous indication if you get this far off. I just leave it in auto, but you can use these two if you really want to be specific about what propagational method or measurement method you want to use. This is for the takeoff angle. And I just read recently that he used to default it at 0.1, but he's now defaulting it at 0.3. If you have particular arrays of antennas that give you specific takeoff angles, more than you know what you have with a dipole or something fairly simple, you might want to make this change to be more accurate with what you're receiving with your antennas. I tend not to change much else here. Just to explain some of the other things on the map here, these 3 dots are for the transmit location, these 3 dots are for the receive location, and these 3 dots are for the midpoint. And the midpoint is this blue circle. What this first dot allows me to do is set the gray line at my sunrise. Here it sets the sunset time, and here it sets the midnight time. And I can do the same for the middle circle, or I can do the same for the receive. So there's sunrise, sunset, and midnight. Or we can just leave, there's a slider down here that allows you to set the time. You can set the date. Right now we're using today's date, and because I monkeyed with this, we no longer have our current time. But we're at, what is it? 0430.
Dave,
Yeah.
will you explain to those who may not know what the significance is of gray line?
The gray line is the demarcation between daylight and darkness. And as the Earth turns, of course, you know, where we are goes through the day cycle and then goes through the night cycle. And as the Earth tilts during the year, the way this gray line, or what's also known as the terminator, its shape changes. And what you'll notice when, you know, I think most people are aware that, you know, above the Arctic Circle, for a period of time during the winter, they're in total darkness. And the South Pole is in eternal daylight for that same period of time. And then as the farther south you come from the North Pole, or the farther north you go from the South Pole, you get eventually to a point where you start getting a little bit of sunrise and a little bit of sunset. I mean, the sun might come up very low on the horizon and go right back down, you know, within an hour or two, depending on how close you are to those, the Arctic Circle, and I guess it's the Antarctic Circle. Don't quote me on that one. But the point is, there is propagation along this line, which is very special because it can connect parts of the Earth propagationally where there normally isn't propagation. And as an example, especially at certain times of day or times of year, you can see here, if I put the sunrise, and I could have done that by clicking this first dot, the gray line is going along here, along Greenland and Iceland. And so there might be propagation to that part of the world at these times where there might not be otherwise. But even more importantly, as I come down to the opposite side of the Earth, at this time of day, at this time of year, I will have maybe a 10, 15-minute window of propagation possibly along this path that I might not have otherwise. If I change the date, for instance, if you look at the solstice, and I think, I can't remember the solstice,
Go straight up.
back at yeah, is it solstice rather than the equinox? This is the point where the Earth's tilt shifts from one to another. As we go from September forward into autumn and into winter, that's when the Earth is tilting in such a way that the North Pole will be in total darkness. And when we look at the map, and I don't know if I can zoom out anymore, but the daylight, the terminator is vertical, and as we go forward let me just go forward a month, more or less. You see how it starts to curve. What is it in December 21st? This is the roundest that this terminator will get when we're at the winter and summer solstices. So this gray line is very, very important for HF propagation, because there are times when we'll get propagation that we wouldn't have otherwise. So for instance, there's Sri Lanka right here. And as Sri Lanka is going into nighttime, on the East Coast here, well, here I am in Florida, that would be a very good time to work them long path or short path, depending on what frequency. So that's something about gray line. We kind of played with these settings. These are the two things I wanted to show you just to sort of wrap this up. There are propagational charts that are generated. And one of the cool things about these is that they're animated so that as I scroll along them, I've got all this information I can read. These various colors correspond to different frequency bands. And there's information about what's happening. Now this is a like an absolute power reading. That's this particular setting. There's a drop-down menu here, and there's a whole host of choices you have. If you look at relative, and let me start this out with the propagational wheel because this is maybe a little more straightforward. Between these 2 points, at whatever time of day and year I have, well, this is a 24-hour cycle, but on this date, each of these windows tells me for a particular band here, 10 through 80, at a particular hour, what the percentage chance is that, or 90. What this says is 95% of the days of the month in which this was calculated, I have a chance of making contact on 20 meters, or that there are conditions that will enable that contact. If I look at this one, I can see here on 12 meters that it's down to 3%. These are just so wonderfully animated. So you can spend time analyzing them, or you can just hover over them and then read the information in the middle here. So at 7 universal coordinated time on 30 meters, there's 28% chance, or 28% of the days of that month, there are conditions that will facilitate. Now, if I go back to the propagational charts and I look at the relative, that's sort of giving me the same information for these. Each of these colors is a different band. If I look at this plot, these are the predicted percentages or the predicted signal strengths above the minimum necessary to make contact. And here again, reading the descriptions in that manual will help a lot with understanding. I know this is a lot to take in. And so what I really want to do is just show you that it exists and give you an idea of how to dig into it. But that's really what you need to do, is really spend time reading the descriptions. And he goes through pretty much everything here. If I get down here to this section, he'll explain, what this information means, what all these buttons at the bottom of the chart of the screen will mean. I'll show you, and he describes each one of these charts and these terms. Here, for instance, it tells you that there's a minimum signal strength that the program calculates for a particular path that one is described, and what that SDBW chart tells you is how many days, what percentage of the days is your signal going to be at that level or higher, and it will also give you that predicted signal strength. So these are it's a pretty powerful tool, and I think the best thing to do is just jump in and play with it. And by using the date and time, you can look at the way it was in the past, or make predictions in the future several months ahead. I don't know that they specify specifically, how much time in the future you can go, but I imagine the program will tell you when it's out of information. In other words, it hasn't done a prediction for the smooth sunspot number. So I think with that, I'm going to go back to, all right, well, so this was the page I wanted to show. These are the two websites that I was mentioning, the G0KYA and this Australian propagation information. And so I think that's a wrap. I just wanted to share, now the sun's going down here. This was 2012 from A73A, Seek Your Worldwide Phone Multi-Multi. And so I got the chance to see the Caravanserai sun for myself. And with that, I will hand it over to you.